Spring came like a promise. Half-kept snow began to melt, and the rivers swelled with a hungry roar. The trees shed their white shrouds, revealing the stubborn green underneath. But with the thaw came danger tracks in the mud that didn't belong to deer, eyes in the dark, too patient to be wolves. It was time to leave. Eli packed what little they had into the wagon: blankets, salted meat, a map smudged with rain and hope. Sarah wrapped Leela close to her chest, swaying gently as the baby nuzzled in her sleep. They couldn't stay. Too many eyes knew of them now. Eli's plan was simple: make it across the range into Wyoming territory, find someone willing to listen, clear his name before the news did. But escaping the frontier is never easy. In the land like grief doesn't forget. They'd barely made it 2 days before the wagon gave out in a riverbed. Wheels shattered on a submerged stone. Thunderheads loomed, painting the sky black and silver. Eli cursed under his breath, climbing down into the rushing water, his boots sinking into the icy current. Sarah held the baby, her eyes scanning the tree line. Then it happened fast, brutal. A bear, massive, matted, and driven mad by hunger. It burst from the thicket with a roar like falling timber. Lila screamed. The world collapsed into chaos. Eli fired a shot. Missed. The bear reared up, blotting out the sky. Sarah turned, shielding the child. But before death could land its blow, a sharp, piercing whistle sliced through the storm. An arrow struck the bear's flank. It roared, whirled, and stumbled away into the trees, bleeding and enraged. From the forest shadows emerged a figure, tall, silent, marked by smoke and time. A native man, his body painted with earth tones, a longbow in one hand, a tomahawk on his hip. Scars crisscrossed his chest like stories never told. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. They called him Krogazbzak. Some said he was born of the hills themselves, a shadow with a heartbeat. Others believed he died once and clawed his way back from the spirit world. All Sarah knew was that death had shown up and turned away. That night, they camped under a canopy of dripping pines. The fire crackled low. Crow sat across from them, sharpening his blade with slow, steady motions. He never asked why they ran, never asked where they were going. Instead, he handed Eli a bundle of animal sinew, and ash showed him how to read the footprints of elk, how to find dry tinder in soaked woods. He gave the baby a carved elk totem, smoothed from antler and inlaid with turquoise. She gripped it with tiny hands, eyes wide and curious. Later, as the flames died down, Sarah spoke for the first time in hours. Her voice cracked like old wood. "I had a boy once," she said. "Before this place, before the mountains." Eli turned toward her. She didn't look at him, just stared into the fire. Fever took him, cold night. I couldn't get the herbs in time. He was only for silence again. The only sound was the fire, and Lila's soft breathing. Eli's voice came low, careful. "Do you ever think the land takes from us to remind us we don't own a damn thing?" Sarah finally looked at him. There was pain in her eyes, but also defiance. "No," she said. "I think it takes to see if we're worth giving something." Back the next morning, they were found. 6 riders came at dawn, crests of dust in their wake, sun glinting off rifles and spite. Bounty hunters, cold as men, mean, lean, and ready to earn their coin with blood. It came like thunder. No time to think, just fire, steel, and survival. Bullets sliced through trees. A horse screamed and collapsed in a heap. Eli rolled behind the wagon, clutching his rifle, his side burning from where a shot had grazed him. Crow moved like water, silent and deadly. His blade slipped into one man's throat before the others knew what hit them. Sarah climbed a pine, perched like a hawk. She fired once, then again, taking out 2 more with clean, practiced shots, but there were too many. Eli cried out he'd been hit, this time clean through the side. Blood soaked his shirt. He fell, gasping, crawling toward cover. Sarah dropped from the tree and dragged him behind a rock ledge. Her hands were slick with his blood. Lila screamed somewhere behind them. Sarah pressed cloth to the wound, sobbing. "If I don't make it," Eli tried to say. She cut him off, voiced fierce through her tears. "Don't you dare, not after all this." Crow moved through the last man like smoke and steel. When the silence fell, it was total. No gunfire, no wind, just the heavy breath of the living and the stillness of the dead. That night, Crow burned the bodies one by one. He stood guard beneath the stars while Sarah held the baby and Eli fought to stay alive. The mountains watched silently, older than any grief or gunfire. They were still breathing, but the edge had never felt so close. The first light of dawn painted the valley in washed-out gold as the wagon, battered and blood-stained, creaked its way into the edge of a mining camp nestled deep in the hills. Men looked up from their morning fires, and women paused with water, buckets halfway to their lips. Few spoke, but eyes softened when they saw Sarah holding the baby, and the man slumped beside her, half-conscious and wrapped in bloodied cloth. Sarah didn't waste time. She leapt from the wagon before it even stopped, clutching the child in one arm and Eli with the other. Her voice cracked as she shouted for the doctor. A man emerged from a tent, gray-haired, no-nonsense, hands already lifting Eli onto a makeshift stretcher. No questions, just action. Inside the cabin that served as the camp's infirmary, time bent. It moved both painfully slow and far too fast. Hours bled into days. Eli burned with fever. Then one morning just before the sun broke, he opened his eyes, saw the baby curled up on Sarah's chest, sleeping peacefully. Saw her eyes rimmed red but steady. He was alive. Crow was gone. No word, no goodbye. Just vanished into the trees, the same way he'd come, like fog or memory. Weeks passed. Sarah stayed. She cooked broth, boiled linens, sang softly to the baby. When the wind howled outside the windows, Eli healed slowly. He walked with a limp now, carried pain with him like a scar carved into the soul. But strength returned to his voice. Fire returned to his eyes. One day, a letter arrived, sealed broken with shaking fingers. Inside news from Wyoming. Someone had listened. The judge had read Sarah's affidavit. Eli's name was being cleared. Sheriff Calder's crimes were no longer whispers, they were evidence. Too many bodies, too many lies. Sometimes, justice doesn't ride fast. But when it rides true, it changes everything. The return to town was not triumphant. It was quiet, measured, a different kind of storm. They rode in together, Sarah, Eli, the baby, nestled close. Townsfolk gathered like wind gathering dust. Whispers followed them. The courthouse was small, wooden, and tense. The judge read through pages with furrowed brows. Sarah took the stand, her voice steady, her spine straight. She told them everything. The ambush, the baby, the sheriff's bounty. The gallery murmured. Calder sat slouched in his seat, seething. His mustache twitched. His eyes scanned the room like a cornered animal. "You think folks'll believe a ghost like you?" he growled, rising. Sarah's gaze didn't waver. "I'm not a ghost," she said coldly. "I'm the storm you didn't see coming." He moved fast, but not fast enough. His hand reached for his hip, fingers curling around the grip of his revolver. But before the weapon cleared leather, a single gunshot cracked through the air. Calder froze, looked down. Blood bloomed through his vest. He fell. Crow stood silently in the back of the room, rifle lowered, smoke curling from the barrel. No one had seen him enter. No one stopped him as he turned and walked back out. The gavel fell hard. Final. Eli Jameson cleared of all charges. Offered land, compensation, a fresh start. He looked to Sarah. "That land," he said quietly. "I don't need it alone, not anymore." She didn't answer at first. Just looked at the child in her arms, now giggling, reaching for Eli's outstretched hand. Her eyes shimmered. Then came a faint, weary smile. The first real one in a long, long time. In the end, it wasn't land or legacy that saved them. It wasn't the rifle or the letter or even the testimony. It was a woman with nothing left to lose, who chose to give again. The final morning broke soft and golden. On a quiet hill not far from their new home, they planted a sapling. The soil was rich, the air sweet with pine. Sarah pressed a hand over the tiny trunk. Eli covered it with his baby, squealed in delight. Up on the ridge, Crow watched, still as a statue. Wind tugged at his coat. His eyes lingered not on the tree, but on the family beneath it. Then he turned and vanished into the mist. The fire crackles softly inside the cabin. Shadows flicker across wooden walls as the storm rages outside. Narrator VO. In the heart of the wilderness, kindness is currency, and survival often comes at the edge of mercy. Sarah sat by the cradle she'd fashioned from an old whiskey barrel and pinewood scraps. The baby stirred, murmuring softly in sleep, unaware that her world had almost ended before it began. Eli lay motionless on the cot, bandaged, his breathing shallow but steady. He had the face of a man who had been carved down to bone by suffering and left to wander with the ghosts of his past. Days passed with little change. Sarah fed the child with goat's milk warmed over the fire. She wiped Eli's brow through fever and mumbled nightmares. He spoke names in his sleep: Clara, Jeb, Reynolds, names Sarah didn't know, names that tore at him from within. On the fourth morning, he woke. His eyes fluttered open, panicked, as he struggled to rise. Sarah gently pushed him back down. "Sarah, you're safe here. Just rest." He looked around, disoriented. Eli hoarse. "The baby, Sarah, she's all right, sleeping like a colt after a storm." He stared at her. Then quietly, tears rimmed his eyes. "Eli, you don't even know us." Sarah, "I know what it looks like when the world takes everything and leaves you bleeding in the snow." That's enough. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the wind outside and the low creak of the rocking chair by the hearth. Eli turned his head slowly to the cradle, as if afraid she might not be real. Days turned into weeks. Slowly Eli found his strength, and with it his voice. He learned to change the baby's wrappings, to stir the fire, to boil roots into tea under Sarah's watchful eye. Her hand showed him where the wounds ran deep, not just in his body but in his soul. He told her eventually about what happened. Eli Reynolds came after the spring melt, said I owed him stock. I didn't. But when a man like that says you owe, the town listens. He burned my barn, poisoned my well. When I went to the sheriff, well, turns out he'd already been bought. He clenched his jaw. His hands trembled. Eli, my wife, she didn't make it through the fire. Sarah placed a hand on his. Not a word spoken, none needed. The baby, they named her Leela, short for Delilah, her mother's name. She grew stronger each day, small, curious eyes. already trying to grip the world that had tried to cast her aside. And just when the ice began to thaw from their hearts, danger began to stir in the world beyond the cabin. One night, as Sarah gathered kindling, she felt that uncanny silence that meant something was watching. She turned toward the woods, eyes narrowed, footprints in the snow. Not animal. She returned to the cabin and pulled open a trapdoor beneath the rug. From it she drew a long rifle wrapped in waxed cloth. Eli looked up from tending Leela. Eli, expecting trouble. Sarah. No, but expecting and preparing are two different things. He understood. He always had. Miles away, back in the nearest town, a poster fluttered on a saloon wall. Wanted, Eli Jameson, dead or alive, $200 reward. Sheriff Calder spat tobacco and jabbed a finger at the parchment as he spoke to a pair of bounty riders, lean men with cold eyes. Sheriff Calder, he's got a baby with him now. If you have to shoot, just don't miss. Bring back the body. Back at the cabin, Eli held Leela as she drifted into sleep. Tiny fingers wrapped around the edge of his coat. He looked up at Sarah, who stood by the window, rifle leaned by her side, staring into the dark trees like she could feel every pair of eyes hidden behind them. Eli. Thank you for everything, Sarah. Don't thank me yet. Outside, the moon rose over the snow-covered land. But inside, the fire burned, warm and defiant. 2 survivors, 1 child, and a storm still coming. 1 week later, snow continues outside. Eli sits weakly at the table. The baby coos in a handmade cradle. Sarah brews broth in a blackened pot. The room smells of pine, smoke, and something ancient like memory itself. Eli watches her for a long moment, his voice barely more than a crackle of wind. Why'd you help us? Sarah doesn't turn. She stirs the broth steadily, methodically, because someone once helped me a long time ago. A silence settles, heavy, but not empty. You don't even know me, Eli says, not as accusation but as a wounded truth. Sarah answers softly, don't have to. I know the look of a man who's lost everything. The next days unfold in layers, slow, deliberate, like the land around them waking from winter. Eli regains strength, first in small ways, holding a spoon, standing without falling, changing the baby's swaddles with trembling hands. Then, in deeper ones, chopping wood beside the cabin, fixing the back gate with salvaged wire, fetching water without being asked. With each act, he claims a piece of himself back. Sarah teaches him about herbs, how the dried roots curled in jars could calm a fever or stir a sluggish heart. He listens with the focus of a man who knows knowledge can be life. She shows him how to sling a rifle, where to set traps. He watches her closely, never asks questions about the scars he glimpses beneath her sleeve, or the way she stiffens when thunder rolls. They don't speak much, but meaning is passed in other ways, the hand steadying the other on ice. A half smile when the baby giggles. The way Sarah wraps Eli's coat tighter around his shoulders without saying a word. Grief has a language all its own. And sometimes, silence is the only grammar two broken souls can understand. At night, the wind dies. The world holds its breath, and something stirs in the trees. A figure, shadowed, watching. In the pale blue light of the moon, a rifle glints. Sarah feels it before she sees it. Hand instinct that rises like a tide. She looks toward the woods, her eyes narrowing. She doesn't speak of it to Eli, but she moves differently after. Sleeps lighter, loads the rifle each night. Miles away, Sheriff Calder leans against a bar counter in a smoke-choked saloon. He's a man with hands to clean for the deeds they've done. He flicks a match and lights a cigar, then slams a wanted poster onto the table. Eli Jameson, he mutters to 2 lean bounty riders, dead or alive, preferably dead. Take the kid to loose ends. He smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. Back at the cabin, Sarah kneels beside a floorboard and lifts it, revealing an oilcloth rifle, long and heavy. She checks it, loads it with precision. No wasted movement. Eli watches her from across the room, cradling the baby in one arm. That for the wolves? He asks, voice quiet. Sarah looks at him, her face hard as carved granite. No, she says, wolves don't wear spurs.